Hey guys, it's Guy here, and this video is going to be about how to take components from your pretty component library and create good looking screens with them. So it's essentially a video about layouts and spacing and that kind of stuff. I'm doing this video because I heard in particular from developers that are also doing their own layouts that this is often a problem. You drag and drop the first component into the screen, and then you start asking, okay, how much space should I leave to the next component? How much padding around the container? How to align stuff? Okay, that's the topic of this video. To get you into the mode of thinking about this kind of stuff, I just want to plant this idea in your brain, which is that every single layout out there on any SaaS product you'd be using today is using the same layout. And that layout is essentially columns and rows. So you always have some variation of what you see on the screen here. Rows, columns, and then columns inside rows, rows inside columns. You can just, look at your favorite product and see if this kind of matches what I'm saying. But I can show you with one specific example too, which is Linear. Linear, the famous, very well designed project management tool. You see, the base layout of this tool is a 2-column layout. The left column is the navigation bar, and the right column is the content area. Then inside these 2 columns, there are rows, And then if I go into one of those issues, I see that then I have like a column-based layout again. Inside this one particular issue here, there are 2 columns. The left one, which is kind of like the title of the issue, etc., and the right one, which is the date and tag, etc. Okay, so it's always rows inside columns and columns inside rows, etc. There's no other option. Okay, so how do we do this kind of layout? How do we build this in Figma? And here I have a very specific suggestion, which is auto layout, and I will show you why. So let's imagine I want to build, a column layout inside this container here. I would drag my row inside, I'll try to place it nicely. Let's say I want to leave, 20 pixels around. Okay, on top is 20, then I nudge it to the right, 20, then here's too large, remove 4 pixels. Okay, kind of okay. Then I copy paste it, drag it carefully, 20. You see, kind of tedious. And what happens, if suddenly I want 24 spacing and 24 padding? Hard problem, right? Like annoying. So luckily Figma has solved this, and auto layout is the answer, which is essentially making your Figma frame behave like a div in HTML. And the way that works is you just enable the auto layout option here, choose how much spacing you want between the elements, in this case 20, how much padding do you want around the elements, horizontal and vertically. That's it. Then I can add just as many of these internal containers as I want. Now, one exception to this are layouts that aren't equally spaced, and an example of that is here. You can see like this sidebar on Linear is a container like this, vertical container, but then there's a group of rows on top and another group at the bottom. So there's kind of like a sub-container that's kind of like holding these top rows together, and another one holding this section down here together. And they are separate from each other. That kind of layout can be achieved with another option of auto layout, which is the auto spacing. So instead of specifying a pixel amount for the spacing between the elements, you just type auto, and now they're going to be equally spaced from each other. If there are only 2, they're just going to be pushed towards opposite ends of the container. But if there are 3, then you see that they are just like equally spaced, 4, etc. And that's how you can make a layout like that one on the Linear navbar. And auto layout is very flexible, and you can very easily switch directions, from a column to a row-based layout. And one thing that you usually need to pay attention to is that you want normally, like 99% of the times, you want your internal containers to kind of like fill the width or the height of your container, depending if you're doing like row based or column based. So for example, in this case, it's a column, and I want my rows to be full with weather to be strange, maybe like one's like this, one's like that. Like that's not how layouts are built normally. And to make sure that happens, you select your children, go to the width in this case, fill container, or if this was a layout in the other direction, you do the exact same thing, but with the height fill container. All right, so how to proceed from here? So you know that all layouts in SaaS are columns and rows inside columns, etc. We've covered that. How do you proceed? And one thing that you need to decide now is on layout density. So a high density layout is one in which there's not a lot of white space. There are, tiny spaces around the elements, small fonts, etc. Here's, our linear example as an example of a high density layout. And here is Monday, another project management tool. You see kind of like same category, but much lower density layout. You see, just look at the title, for example, very large fonts, a lot of white space, etc. And this is a decision that you need to do. Sometimes, it's primarily like a branding decision. There are also, of course, like functional considerations. Like if you need to display a lot of information on the screen, you have no option except to go for a high density layout, right? But you need to make that decision. And once you did that, I want to give you like a very, very concrete tool to think about spacing. Spacing is usually one of those things that the first time you come across it, you ask yourself, okay, how much space should I leave? Sometimes you just make a quick decision on the spot and then forget eventually and end up with a messed up design with different spacings in different places. And one very simple system that is a solution to that is it's a starting point. Like it's not law. You don't need to follow this like religiously, but it's a starting point. It's my starting point. For a high density layout like linear, I always start, with a spacing scale like this. My smallest space is 4 pixels, then it doubles on each step, 4, 8, 16, 32. If this would be like a higher density layout, you could start at 8 or 10, 20, it doesn't matter. The important part is that the spacing scale fits the density you want and that it's consistent. And of course, like picking a base font size is also a choice that needs to be kind of like made around the same time. Density, spacing, font size, these things need to be decided together. And here I'm going to go with 14 pixels. Could be 15, could be 13, honestly. Okay, so layouts are just boxes with rows and columns inside rows, and got the gist. But how does that look like in practice? And I want to show you an example. When dealing with spacing, you're essentially going from the largest space to the smallest space. So the high-level building blocks of your app or feature are going to be more widely spaced, and I'm going to have like larger space between them. And the more micro you go, like elements inside elements inside elements, the tinier and tinier and tinier the spacing is going to get. And to see how that works, I prepared like a little example. So imagine I have this card here in blue because I'm using my largest space for it, the 32 pixels as padding and as spacing between the elements. Now imagine inside each of those rows, I want to add more content. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to space it a little bit less than on the parent container. So I'm going to use the green space, which is 16 pixels. If I go one level deeper and now add, elements inside the elements that I previously created, then I'm going to pack them even closer together. I'm going to use the yellow spacing, which is 8 pixels. And now if I'm at like the most micro level that this system supports, imagine it might be, I have like a little icon with a sentence in front of it. How much space am I going to use? Well, an even smaller one. And in this system, it's the pink one, 4 pixels. That's it. This is no law, of course, and paddings don't need to be symmetric. Sometimes you can have more vertical padding than horizontal padding, or the opposite. Everything is possible, and the only thing that matters is that it looks good. There is no law, like I was saying, but it's a good starting point. What certainly is not going to happen is that you progress with spacing the other way around, from the smaller to the largest. That never happens. So start here and see where it takes you, and make adjustments if needed. That's my suggestion. Okay, but so far this has been quite abstract, and I like these videos to be as hands-on as possible. So what I would like to do next is show you, a relatively simple example, but end-to-end. And the example is, we want to create one of those, plan cards that you see on pricing pages of SaaS tools. You see like the standard plan and the pro plan and features inside, and that little card, it's I think a good exercise to design it. And my starting point, as it's going to be your starting point as a designer, is some notes that you took. The notes that I took from the person that gave me this task is that this plan is going to be called standard plan, and we want to pitch it as, we offer simple pricing and all features are always included. It's kind of like our marketing angle. There are two prices, $9 a month or $15, depending on whether I pay monthly or yearly, or the other way around, yearly or monthly. And it always includes unlimited contacts, unlimited shareable links, up to 5 seats, lifetime updates, and people can sign up immediately. They don't have to, call sales, etc. And, I guess you'll agree that this is hard to work with, just a flat list of stuff, like how do I turn this into rows and columns and that kind of stuff? And the answer to that is that we need to add some structure to this list. We need to create some information architecture. And that's nothing else than, organizing this information in groups of, things that belong together. And one very easy way to do that, in my opinion, that I always use is, bullet lists. And here is one, so I took the exact same text from before and I just sorted it into these 4 different groups. The plan information title, subtitle is one group, pricing is another, features and benefits is another, and then the action is another group. Pretty simple, pretty quick to do it on Figma too with these bullet lists. No need to complicate. And of course, like if you look at these 4 sections, they kind of map to also 4 sections in the UI, like rows or columns or, boxes essentially. It's as simple as that. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my design system and I'm going to pick the components that I think I'm going to need. I think I'm going to need, for the first section, some sort of large text and a smaller one for the subline. Then here on the pricing, I want to do like $9 a month and then a toggle to switch between yearly and monthly. So I pulled in this toggle from the design system. Then for the features and benefits, I want to do like a bulleted list and I want to use this check mark as a bullet, and then I have a button for my call to action. So now it's time to put this stuff together into a card. Here on the right, I'm going to draw my card, new frame. I'm going to make it, this is like a random decision, but I'm going to make it, 400 pixels wide, just because yes. And I'm going to start, dragging and dropping my components inside it. So the first one is the title. Going to be somewhere inside here. And then the subtitle. Then this is where I'm going to write my price, and then my toggle. And then, I want to do some sort of bullet list like this. And at the bottom, I have my button. And now you're probably thinking, okay, what am I watching? This is looking terrible. It is, but bear with me. So now it's time to put auto layout in action. I'm going to make this a vertical layout, right? It's a card, it's a list of things inside the card. It's a vertical layout. But I've lost all my grouping, right? So the title and the subtitle, they belong together. So I select both of them and I create a frame around them. And that's basically what I'm going to do with all the things that belong together. Just group them again. Okay, now what we learned about spacing comes into action. So on the top level of the card, I'm going to use my largest spacing, right, which was 32 pixels. You can also do that with variables. I added these variables here in Figma, and then you can use them here. It's practical in case you want to play around with different spacings. So now I have 32 pixels around and 32 pixels spacing between these objects. So inside each of them, I am, just as I preached before, going to use again column-based layout, auto layout, and I am going to use the smaller space after that, which was 16 pixels, right? 16 pixels. Make things full width, as I said before, 16 pixels. Now, this is a bit of a special case because here there's one more level in the hierarchy, right? So I want many of these combinations of, tick and text, and I want them to be organized, as a column. But within each bullet, it's actually a horizontal layout. And here I'm going to use like the smallest spacing I have, which is, or I'm going to use the next one, which is 8 pixels, right? Like that, horizontal. And how many bullets were there? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bullets. And these 4 bullets, obviously, they form a group. So I add another frame around it. Auto layout. 8 pixels. Fill container. Quite happy. Just gonna copy paste the text here. Okay, I think it's not looking too bad. I feel like it's not 100% there yet, and I'm going to do some small adjustments. So one adjustment that I'm seeing is that these two, like the difference in hierarchy between the big, like the highest level blocks and within the block is too little, so it's hard to say that this is a block and this is another. So I'm going to approach these two together by removing the space and going basically one step. I'm going from 16 to 8. Now, I know that the $9 is much more important information than the word month, so I'm going to reduce the size of the word month. This button down here needs to say get started now, and like I said, unless something indicates the opposite, we're always going for full width kind of layouts. Now I'm kind of feeling this button could actually work as a good separator here, and I think we're starting to get there. I'm just going to now, do some beauty adjustments, add a little, rounded corners, a very subtle border here, and that's it, you see. So it's one column layout, with 3 rows inside. Each of these bullets is again like a horizontal layout with icon and text. And well, I hope this was a good exercise for you, that you're satisfied, and I look forward to seeing you here again.